All right. Welcome everyone to the Friday Tech Talk. Today's speaker is the one and only Erik Gross. He is a co-founder of the Tech Academy and a senior .NET developer. Today's talk is called Leveraging Recruiters and Staffing Companies. And Erik will go over how to unlock the secrets to leveraging recruiters for your tech career. He will go over how to connect with recruiters the best ways. He will cover how to understand their process and how to utilize their expertise to your best advantage. You will also learn practical strategies and tips to stand out and increase your chances for finding your ideal tech role. Without further ado, Erik, take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, it's coming up.
Excellent. Is it good? Everything's still good? Yeah. I'm not used to using Google Meet. I use Zoom all the time. All right, let me move some of these controls around. Okay, so this is not the right tab. Hold on a second. I am not used to all these controls, and I apologize. Yeah, this will be a lot easier. I'm just going to share my whole screen. Great, you get to see the 8,000 tabs that I have open. All right, now leveraging recruiters and staffing companies. Can you see that?
Yep, we can see it.
Good, excellent. All right, so I really appreciate you all taking some time to do this, especially in the middle of a Friday, and I hope we can provide some value. There's a fair number of things we're going to go over here. We're going to have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And with this platform, it's not as easy for me to kind of see what's going on in the chat. So if any really cool things come up, there it is, okay. I've got the chat. I'll try to watch chat. We're going to have time for Q&A, but if anything comes up that's vital, Rick, just cut in and I'll answer it, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Matthew says he's in Memphis, Tennessee, and they built igloos. That's awesome. Okay. Share that. All right, good. All right. So I'm going to preface everything with just saying that in my career as a technologist, recruiters and staffing specialists have been unbelievably helpful and valuable to me. I haven't always used them, but I have a lot. And overall, it's been a wonderful experience. There are some gotchas. We're going to cover those, some things to look out for. But overall, I have loved working with recruiters and staffing companies. So let's dive into this, right? We're going to cover why they matter in your technology job search. And my goals for today for you are that you'll understand how they operate, just baseline, how do recruiters work, how do staffing companies operate. There's some nuances there. You'll learn some practical strategies on like, how do I work effectively with them so that I can, when I get hired, but more importantly, actually help them be a long-term asset in your career. And I'm going to give you some actionable steps, not just, hey, here's some interesting data, things you can do right away, okay? So first of all, just some basics. What are they? Well, a recruiter is an internal recruiter that works directly for a company. Typically, they're in the HR area or human resources area in most organizations. And this part's important. Most of the time, they are not experienced in technology at all, which is very intimidating to most of them. It's kind of rough for them, okay? They got trained in human resources processes, in compliance, in administration, and now they're working for a company that hires a lot of technology resources, but they don't know technology terms or concepts very well. That's an important thing to keep in mind the entire time you work with recruiters. All right, and we'll cover what the impact is on that as we go through this. Now, there's a different kind of recruiter, which is an agency recruiter. They work for a staffing agency, and the agency services multiple companies. And it's really important to ascertain right at the beginning of your interaction with a recruiter, are they internal or do they work for an agency? It can greatly affect how you interact with them. Obviously, there's a very clear-cut thing, which is if it's an internal recruiter, they're really only looking at you for positions or even maybe just one position in their company. Whereas an agency recruiter could be talking to you about a position with one company and recognize that you might be a good fit somewhere else, and they have the ability to actually get you in communication and help you get a job there. Big difference, right? Which brings us, if you look at agency recruiters, to what are staffing companies, right? They're companies that provide temporary job placement, contract job placement, permanent job placement. That's what they do, right? And there's lots of them. I want to cover one pretty common misconception about working with a staffing company, or specifically working with an agency recruiter who works for that staffing company and can help get you hired. There's still a relatively common misconception inside the technology industry that if you end up going through a staffing company or an agency, you're going to end up getting lower pay because they're going to take a cut. In fact, drop into chat if you would, and just let me know whether or not that is something that you kind of thought maybe that's the way it was. Like maybe you'll make less money because you work through a recruiter. Yeah. I'm here to tell you it's 100%, 1,000%, 1,000,000% not true. Factually, especially if you're looking at temporary or contract work, you usually get more money when you go through a recruiter. And let me give you a bit of background on that. One of the biggest things to kind of ask yourself is, why would a company that wants to hire technology resources ever work with a staffing company? Why wouldn't they just have an internal HR person kind of manage all of their hiring? And one of the biggest reasons why is that doing technology hiring is really hard for a number of reasons. One, of course, is this thing we talked about before, where you don't have a lot of the domain knowledge. You don't know a lot of the terms, the technologies, and it can become kind of hard for you to be able to figure out whether a prospective, employee is even worth spending time on, whether they're the right fit, whether they have enough background. When you don't work in that domain very much at all, it can be kind of hard, right? But the other big reason is that the network you have of available people who want to work in tech, your contacts to them can be kind of limited. You don't have personal relationships with a ton of developers out there, or personal relationships with boot camp providers, like the Tech Academy, or engineering departments at universities. You might not have that if you're kind of a small company or even a relatively big one. And so how do you source your prospective employees, your prospective tech resources? If that's not the core thing that you do, and hiring in that technology area doesn't come up that often, you're not going to have a bunch of people to talk to reach out to for job inquiries. And you're basically just going to have to go to a job board and throw up a job posting, and that's about it, and hope that people see it. So a company will go to a staffing company when they want to hire tech resources. First of all, just because they know the staffing companies, one, operate in this domain and typically will know the technology world a little bit better, right? But two, they've got typically thousands or tens of thousands of resumes on file of different resources. They know how to contact people really quick. So instead of being dependent upon, hey, is someone going to happen to spot our ad and call into us or send an email into us, which is what an internal recruiter often has to do, an agency recruiter can send communication out. They can look through their different, their different collection of resumes, their contacts, figure out who might be a good fit, and they can proactively reach out. And so it's a bit more successful, quicker hiring cycle for the company who wants to, bring on tech resources. So the final thing I want to talk about here, and why this matters to the fact that you're probably going to earn more money going through a staffing company, is that often A company wants to hire technology resources will go through a staffing company for temporary roles or contract roles. In other words, they're not usually like, I need a full-time W-2 employee. Let me go to a staffing company. It does happen, but for those, very often, they'll actually take their time and they'll put ads out on the job boards. They'll take a long time recruiting and hiring somebody. But when you want someone real quick, or if you want someone, you know, the project that they're working on, you're going to assign them to might only last 6 months or 12 months, and you don't want to bring on a full-time employee, you're going to outsource that to a staffing company. You're not going to want to have to handle the hiring and inevitable, almost guaranteed firing that's going to happen. You just want to, hey, I'm going to outsource this. Can you go find good candidates, send them to us? If they're vetted well enough and we can get through the interview cycle real quick, we'll bring them on. They'll stay with us for 6 months or a year, and then we'll let them go. We're not going to have to worry about 401k or health insurance or all these ancillary costs that a full-time employee has. So not as satisfying to you, the technology worker. Like, maybe I do want that 401k. Maybe I do want something different, right? I want to be able to get, the health insurance. So a staffing company comes in the middle and they say, hey, listen, Eric, I've got this role for you. It's only 12 months, might extend to 18. Okay. It isn't really planned on, contract to hire, right? It doesn't look like there's going to be a full-time role at the end of it. But it looks like it's a really good fit for you. And we'd like to send you up for it. And your immediate thing would be, okay, I'm going to want more money than I would for a regular full-time job, because I know that in 12 to 18 months at the outside, I'm going to have to be searching for another role. And the fact is, we all know, myself, the recruiter, we all know that budgets can change, business plans can change, and that 12 months isn't guaranteed. And so they could let you go. So for that reason alone, the staffing company knows that they've got to pay a really good wage. But you know who else knows that? The employer. The employer who's going to the staffing company saying, hey, listen, we would very much like to bring someone on. We know that it's kind of rough because we're only going to have them for 6 months, but we're looking for someone with really good value who can hit the ground running, and we're going to pay really good money for it. And it's worth it to them because, again, they know they can let you go at any time. It's a short, bounded period of time. It's a calculatable expense. They're not handling 401k and health insurance and all the extra, things that come with a full-time employee, so they can afford to pay more. And what's really cool about it, and it brings me all around to the original point, is when the staffing company negotiates with the employer on their contract for that specific job they're trying to fill, for that role, they're going to say, okay, what do you ideally want to pay the contractor? And let's say it's, $80 an hour. The staffing company will say, okay, good. We're going to bill you $110 an hour. Those are very real numbers, by the way. I've seen it all the time. So the employer is paying $110 an hour for every hour you work to the staffing company. You're getting 60. And remember, that 60 would be a very competitive high rate in this example. Why do they do that? Because there's enough room, enough split in there for it to happen. The employer can afford it. At the end of the day, they've solved a very short-term vital need without the long-term cost of having you on as a full-time employee. So it's a very long-winded explanation. I just want to give you a lot of background data instead of just Eric said that you can usually make a lot more when you're working at a staffing company, and then it's not true that because they're going to take a cut that you're going to get less. Yes, they get a cut. They provide a valuable service, but you don't pay for it. It doesn't come out of your funds. You'll get a very competitive rate. And by the way, if any recruiter for a staffing company ever tries to tell you anything different, man, it's really tough. After the split, there's just not enough in there, and they're trying to, claim that it's just really they're broken. There's not enough money in the deal. That's a bad sign. For the right technical resource, especially on a contract basis, the money is there. and the staffing company is going to make plenty on you. All right, enough on that. Let me look at this. Oh, love this. Serenity Smile says, in that situation where it's only a 12-month contract, how easy is it to get another job after that? Would it look like you're job hopping if you just did contracts like that? Also, how do you know how much you should be paid if you have to pay for your own benefits, i.e. twice as much as normal? These are good questions. I'll take them up in turn. Yeah, it can make it hard. I did this for about 7 years straight. In most of the 2010s, I deliberately worked on contract jobs. And I did it on purpose because I was trying to, one, learn a lot of different skills very quickly, and two, make a lot of money. And I was also very willing to accept the risk. I knew at that point in my career that if a contract ended quickly, that I would be able to turn around and get another one within a week or less. And so I was willing to live that kind of a life. It wasn't always fun. 3 times in those 7 years, I got let go because the budget thing changed or the business changed directions. And well before we planned on it, I had to have a phone call with my wife saying, hey, the contract ended. As of the end of the day today, I'm not working. Not a fun conversation. But I went into it with eyes wide open, turned around, and within a week had another job. Okay. It was a different market. And I'm a senior developer, and it was pretty great. I had a bunch of niche, pieces of skill that were very in demand. Now, that said, there came a point where I wanted to transition. And I'm like, you know what? I'm done with that game. I want to settle in somewhere. And yes, I had to have occasionally an interesting conversation with a hiring manager about, Erik, you clearly were job hopping for the last several years. Why? And the thing they're trying to find out is, are you a crappy employee? Are you a person that's only going to stay for a little while because they don't want you there? But the moment they found out that I did it on purpose, with malice aforethought, that I had there was a strategy behind why I wanted to do it, it fit for a specific stage of my career or my life, and that those circumstances had changed and I wanted to settle down, it was fine. But all they wanted some assurance that you're not job hopping because people don't like you or you don't do a good job or you can't stay loyal. When they understood that, like, no, I deliberately took short-term contracts that paid well, that added to my skill set. They went, oh, okay, all right. Well, more power to you, Erik. I wouldn't be willing to do that, but I totally see it. So that was my experience, and I've worked with a lot of contractors, and that can work. But you're right to ask the question, because you might very well have to answer, like, looks like you're jumping around a lot. What's going on? All right. Serenity Smile, we're going to answer that question in a little bit. Okay. Now, the second one, how do you know how much you should be paid if you have to pay for your own benefits? There's a whole seminar workshop we could do on that. Okay. But the short version is this. There's a lot of available cost of living calculators and stuff online where you can do a comparison between, bare bones W-2 where you have no benefits and the same typical role where you'd have good benefits. You can do that. You can also literally look at the online marketplaces and find out, okay, what am I going to pay for insurance, right? And you can kind of gauge it in. Now, one final thing is some nuance that we don't have a lot of time to go into full detail on, but when you're on contract, you could be, and this is a critical distinction. I'm glad that you asked this question. Look at that slide, talking about a staffing company, where it says it provides job placement services. An important thing to understand is the staffing company going to hire you directly as an employee, or are they going to bring you on as a contractor? And it's a very important distinction. Now, there's a tremendous amount of data we could go into about how actual contractors work, what that means. There's a specific legal definition. There's a tremendous amount of employment law around it. And it's an area that gets abused a lot in an effort to pay people less who are being brought on under a contract rather than a direct employee relationship. But again, we don't have a full amount of time in this presentation to talk about that. The one big thing is that the most common practice is the staffing company hires you. and then they subcontract out your services to the employer for a certain period of time. You work for the staffing company. That's the most common arrangement. You don't work for the employer. It's a pretty important distinction, okay? And there's, again, there's a lot of nuance that can go in here. We've got a bunch of stuff to cover, so I can't expound greatly on that. But that's a bottom line fundamental to understand, is that if you go to a staffing company and you get a job through them, you're probably going to be their employee. Some of the better ones actually do provide health insurance, by the way, or actually do provide some sort of like 401k or invest, retirement kind of funds. So look for that, okay? But if you look at this slide, this is just the basic question of like, what are the kinds of recruiters, internal and agency, and what's a staffing company? Now, I know I went into a lot on that, but there's a lot of like confusion about this area and nuance to how it works. And I want to be able to give you some background, okay? It'll make the further slides we have, the later slides, a little more understandable, okay? Yeah, Serenity Smile, we're going to get to that question. All right. Examples of staffing companies are Robert Half. They have a national footprint, sometimes international. Tech Systems, Insight Global. I've gotten jobs through all of them, by the way. Now, a question might be, how do these entities connect candidates to employers? And I kind of just, I hope I elaborated on that they're going to make the connection, but if you end up being liked by the employer and getting hired, then typically you're going to get a job through the staffing company and be contracted out to the employer. That's how the connection works. Now, an important consideration there is that one of the things that you will see very rarely, it's very dangerous for an employer to do this. They might try to hire you directly. Now, you see it very rarely. And if you do, don't take the job. They're trying to bypass the staffing company and hire you, maybe even for the same rate, maybe even for more, but they're trying to cheat the staffing company. Don't ever, 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 ever do that. It's, first of all, they've signed contracts that they won't do that. Guaranteed, they have a contract with the staffing company. They won't try to poach you. Secondly, what kind of an ethical company is that? They'll just blatantly ignore the very real help that was given by the staffing company. You never would have talked to them and been properly qualified and had the interview if not for the staffing company, and they're going to ignore all that and try to poach you. Walk away. Don't ever, ever do it. All right, let's move on. What are the benefits? Again, I said at the top, I really like working with recruiters. There's a couple of reasons why. They find out about the jobs before almost anybody. The best of them have a tremendous network of connections into hiring managers and HR professionals all across their given domain, whether it's a regional or a national sort of community. They've got the connections, and they can find out about jobs sometimes before they even go on the market, which is really, really valuable, okay? If a company doesn't have to pay these sometimes $1,500 a month for a job listing, that's how much it is, I think, on dice.com. I think it costs $1,500 a month or something like that. If they don't have to pay that and then go straight to a recruiter and say, hey, we're about to post this job. You know, Jane, do you have any people that might be good for it? I'll send you over the job description. And Jane's got her Rolodex. Sorry, I just showed how old I am. Jane has her list of contacts, and she says, oh, I've got these 5 people might be a good fit for that. And Jane connects the employer up to someone who ends up getting hired, and the company didn't have to pay any money. They love that. So it's a really nice benefit to you to work with a recruiter. Another one is the stuff that comes from those connections, insider knowledge about companies and roles. They're able to tell you much more about how that company works, what the job will really be like, what's a really good fit and what isn't a good fit. You're never going to get that straight from the company. If you're working with the company agency, company recruiter, right, an internal recruiter, their job is a PR job as much as it is a human resources job. They're never going to tell you, yeah, we've kind of burned through 3 different engineering managers in the last year and a half, and morale's a little bit shaky, but this new person that came on, we think she's really stable. I've worked with her a lot at a previous company. I think she's awesome, and I think this company's going to stabilize out. Pretty smart for you to go there. The internal recruiter will never tell you any of that. But I've had that exact same conversation with external agency recruiters where they're like, listen, you may have heard through the grapevine, things are a little rocky at this employer. Let me tell you what I know about that and why I still think you should talk to them. That insider knowledge is fantastic. All right. They can also really help with interview prep. If they have these relationships, first of all, they've seen the outcomes of more interviews than anyone you know, right? They've seen more resumes than anyone you know in that industry, right? Which is great, okay? But they also know the individual personalities of the people you're going to interview because they know the people at this company. They go on site and visit and meet people and get to know them if they're good at their job. So they can help streamline the application process. I don't know about you, but have you seen this? There are still in 2025 employers that require you to apply by manually entering in all of the information on your resume. There's memes about it all over the internet because it's still true, right? That's one example of how you can streamline the application process. The recruiter can say, never mind all that. That's absurd. Don't apply on the job site. Send me your resume. I'll get it to the right person. That's nice. And there's lots of other ways they can make the application process smoother and faster for you, okay? Roz, we're going to cover that question about where to find the recruiters specialized to your industry in a bit. How do you talk about finding the right fit? Now, this is critical. Part of it has to do with them. Part of it has to do with you. It really is a two-way street. It's an actual relationship. Yes, it's a business relationship, but it's a true relationship. It's not supposed to be transactional in nature. Hi, I'm a recruiter. I have a job description that looks like this. Oh, I've looked at your resume. You happen to look like a fit. I'm going to connect you to that job. Thank you very much. I've got my money. See you later. If it's like that, you don't want anything to do with it. There needs to be a fit. How do you find that right fit? Some of the key criteria are, do they specialize in specific technology roles or industries? You're not often going to want to go with a recruiter that's a generalist that, gets people jobs in several different industries, okay? And especially if they've got no tech experience. Like if you've got a cousin who works in HR or a job placement and doesn't do tech, stay away, don't do it. You want them specialized in technology roles or in the kinds of industries that you really want to work in. If they're a generalist, you don't want very much to do with them, okay? Pay attention to their reputation reviews. Ask fellow technologists if they know of this company, or better yet, the individual recruiter. What kind of reputation do they have, right? This takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it. If you look online and find out other, because there's LinkedIn's amazing for this, you can find other people that are connected to that staffing company. And if they're connected to that staffing company or that recruiter, they probably know them. Reach out with a private message and say, hey, listen, Jane Smith got a hold of me. She's a recruiter for Acme Tech Recruiting, and I'm just not familiar. Do you happen to know her? Can you tell me anything? Also, you can look at online reviews. You can look at Glassdoor. These things matter. And I'm going to, before we go, pardon me, before we go any farther, I'm going to tell you part of why they matter. I've been beating the drum for years about the value of having one or two extremely strong relationships with individual recruiters in terms of your career. Yes, you'll probably work with dozens or even hundreds over a very long career. But there should be one or two or three people that are in recruitment, in technology, who you really admire and respect them. They admire and respect you. You work together really well, and you are so happy you have them in your life. That's in my opinion, a vital component of a successful career in tech. I know people who've never worked with a recruiter in tech. I get it. That's fine. I've found it to be unbelievably valuable. So their reputation matters. The reviews they have matter. Look at those things, okay? You want a transparent communication and process. Now, what do I mean? I'll give you a couple examples. There are recruiters, when you get them on the phone, you can tell that they're hedging something, like they're not telling you all of everything. They're being very vague about things, okay? Pay attention to those. They may couch it under, well, I can't tell you much about the client until I get the specific form from you, and then you'll learn more. Or I can't tell you too much about the rate. It's kind of adjustable, and you can sense something isn't being said. Pay attention to that. It may not be a full reason to just hang up and never talk to them again. But pay attention for that kind of thing. The process they go through should be simple, clear, and well communicated. If it seems kind of convoluted, confusing, like that's not a good sign. Okay. Red flags to look for. Again, vague job descriptions. And this part's super important. If a recruiter is being aggressive with you about getting a job, run, don't walk in the other direction. A professional will never do that to you. And I've had it happen. Like, we've got to get you applied today. Have you filled out that form? Is that, will you accept that wage? Will you accept that wage? Will you accept that wage? Like, just really aggressive. No, you've got to look at this. I'm like, well, I'm not sure if it's a real good fit. No, you'll be a good fit. Like, listen, do you care about me in the moment because I could be a paycheck for you? Or do you care about me 4 years from now? This kind of stuff matters to me. So please be, look out for these kind of things. Okay. This one should be written in giant, 60-point font in red. Never pay for a recruiter's services ever, for anything, under any circumstances, ever. You should never pay. End of sentence. Walk away, hang up the phone, never reply to the email. That's not a professional. That's a scam. Even if they think they have an official business model that requires it, no. Walk away. I've never done it. All right. And this one's a really big thing. Poor communication, we kind of talked about. And if they're really pressuring you to take a role that really isn't a fit, that's not a good person. They don't have your best interest at heart. Why are they doing that? They're not doing that because they care about you. They're doing that, like I said, because they care about the money right now. By the way, technology recruiters make a lot of money. That $30 to $40 an hour, like split, is not uncommon. That means, 40 hours a week, they're making $1,200 a week off of you. They're placing 50 people, $60,000 a week. Like, technology recruiting companies can make a lot of money. And for the most part, if they're professionals, they're helping both sides of the equation. It's worth it. It's fine. But they have to deliver a good service. And part of that is fitting the right person into the right job. So if you get any kind of pressure to take a role that isn't a fit, walk away. So how do you collaborate with them? Some of these points we'll have already covered a bit, right? But one of the biggest ones is just be very clear about your career goals, your preferences. If you're trying to figure out whether or not to have a relationship with a recruiter, like you're thinking about a long-term, working relationship, if they can't take the time to learn about who you are, what your long-term goals are, what your preferences are, then no, you don't want that. You want someone that genuinely is like, hey, listen, one, I'm a professional. I take my job seriously. So I'm going to try to find out whether you're really a good fit. So I need to know a lot about you, Eric, right? But two, I would really like it if, 7 years down the line, we're still working together. That would be great. So why not treat it with that respect and build towards that eventual possible outcome and find out about this technology resource. Find out about Erik. What are your career goals? What are your preferences? Okay. So be very clear about them. And if they don't listen to you or aren't paying, if that seems not to be important to them, that's a really bad sign. This one's big. Communicate professionally and promptly. And I want to, focus on one aspect of that. We're going to cover it in a little more detail later on. When I say communicate professionally and promptly, that's not just with the recruiter. That's with the potential employer as well. That's part of collaborating really effectively with them, is how you treat the employer is unbelievably important. We'll talk about that in a moment. Okay. Another way to collaborate effectively, make sure your information is up to date. Make sure that wherever online you've got a resume or portfolio, make sure it reflects what's going on with you right now. If a recruiter, sees information and tries to fit you with a role, and you say, oh, that's out of date. No, it's not professional. They're not going to like that. So provide accurate and updated information. And just have good manners. Follow up after interviews. You just got an interview with a client. Don't wait for the employee, for the recruiter to call you. Call the recruiter right away. Hey, it's Erik. I just met with Bob over at Epic Software. Most of it seemed to go really well. It was with him and about 3 or 4 of his lead engineers. They asked me most of the stuff I handled pretty well. Give him a rundown on how the interview went, and he told me the next steps were blah blah blah. He didn't say anything about rate. Right? Just give them a follow up. Don't wait for them to call you. Okay. And if you get placed, if you actually get the position, Follow up a week later. Hey, I'm set up. Everything's going well. It was a hiccup with onboarding. I was waiting for my laptop, but it arrived. Let them know what's going on. It's not just transactional. It's a long-term relationship. Now let's talk about optimizing your personal branding. This is something that 10 or 12 years ago, I not only didn't care about, I actively dismissed as if it wasn't important. Welcome to the connected world of 2025. Your personal branding matters, okay? So, any formatting you do on stuff that's going to be accessible to recruiters, make sure it's compliant with applicant tracking systems. That's what ATS is. Specialized software to filter through typically resumes, but not always, to identify how close of a fit there is between a job requisition and a resume. That's what applicant tracking software is for. And yes, most of the time that applies to directly resumes. There's lots of tools available. Generative AI like ChatGPT is your friend. It can help make sure that your resume is very friendly for applicant tracking system software. Okay, but it can also apply to on LinkedIn. There's a huge about me section or about you or whatever, right? Make sure it's ATS friendly, because there's software out there that can crawl through LinkedIn and read through your whole entire profile, and it will surface likely candidates for recruiters. So that's optimizing your branding. I don't like that that's the way it is, but let's face it, these automated tools like ATS systems are in common use. You have to factor them in, okay? Make sure that in your personal branding, you're highlighting relevant tech skills. If I had a resume towards the end of that, like doing contract after contract after contract, right? My resume was 8 pages long. It was a beast. It had everything on there. And at a certain point, I'm like, the fact that I worked on this early web technology in 1999 really honestly probably doesn't belong on my resume, right? Highlight relevant technology skills. Now, at the beginning of your career, you're probably going to put down everything you know and are good at, right? But periodically review your resume and go, okay, am I talking about technologies that are like, haven't been used in 10 years? They maybe don't need to be mentioned there. They know that if you work in tech for a long period of time, you've accumulated this like sort of collection of older tech skills that still help you think as an engineer, but you're not going to really find them in very common use. So we don't need to list them. Make sure that if you've got a portfolio, you have links to it. If you've got a GitHub account, have links to it. And if you don't have a GitHub account, get a GitHub account. All right. We talked about optimizing LinkedIn, keywords for your desired role. That kind of fits the ATS friendly formatting. And this part, not everyone's going to do this. In fact, in my experience, a very small percentage of the people that are listening right now are going to actually do what I'm about to recommend. You need to be publishing out on the web, whether that's a blog, a YouTube channel, written articles on Medium. Maybe you're putting out your own podcast. The way you think and approach life and engineering and technology, things that are important to you, things you're curious about, deeply interested in, the more you put who you are, how you think, who you are a good fit for, and honestly who you're not a good fit for, the more public you can be about that, the better. And it builds up over time. It's super important. I was trying to calculate it, pardon me, a couple months ago, how many videos there are online of me talking about tech in one way or the other. And we got to about 11 or 1200, and I'm like, I can't find any more. Okay. I didn't set out to do that at first, but at a certain point, I realized, oh, this is kind of important. It's part of my personal brand. I explain technology. I love explaining technology to people. I've done it in all these different sectors and everything. Okay. All right. Maybe I should be causative about my brand. It's happening organically. I need to be causative about it. Okay. Your own journey in this is going to be your journey, but I highly recommend figuring out what medium you like to communicate best in, written or spoken or video, and just start putting stuff out there. Learn in public. Join up with someone else who's working on the same kind of stuff you are, and record yourselves working on a project. Put the videos out on YouTube, or I've done them live on Twitch and then upload them to YouTube afterwards, all kinds of things. But publish, publish, publish. Put yourself out there on the internet. All right. Let's talk about making a strong first impression. And before we even talk about these slides here, I'm going to talk about one of the worst examples I've seen of not making a strong first impression. I got a job for a finance company in Oregon. Oh, I don't know, 2011 or something like that. And the recruiting company that sent me out there gave me a little bit of heads up about this small finance company that had maybe 20, 25 employees. They serviced like the auto dealer industry with some very specialized finance software, and said, you're probably going to like the hiring manager. He's very conservative, but nice gentleman. Go in and have the interview. And so I went and got did the interview. I was really interested in what they do. Like, I'm very curious. I'm a curious person, very interested, right? It went well. I got the job. And I'm talking to the recruiter because I called him right away. I'm like, I think that went really well. And he said, yeah, I already got an email from the guy. I'm like, you did? He said, yeah, he wants to bring you on. I'm like, that doesn't, he says, yeah, that's really quick. I said, well, why? Like, that's awesome. He says, well, honestly, Eric, part of it is this. I sent the guy out there yesterday to interview for that job. And the whole time he's talking to Jim, the guy who I interviewed with and who hired me, the whole time he's talking to Jim, he had a hoodie on with the hood up and ear pods in his ears. And he was wearing blue jeans and looked like a complete slouch. I'm like, what? And so we're going to touch on this a little bit later, but part of your job is to represent the staffing company or the recruiter. You are only there because they recommended that you have this conversation, and what you do reflects on them extremely strongly. So let's talk about some specifics though. When you're talking to a recruiter, strong first impression with the recruiter, be willing, prepared to discuss your technical skills and experiences, right? Research the company, especially if it's a staffing firm. Research the staffing firm ahead of time. They each have their own personality and history and the kinds of companies they like to work with. Staffing companies are created by individuals, and they have likes and dislikes and preferences, and the company they create will reflect that. Research that company. Research the role, if you can, ahead of the time before you're talking to the recruiter, right? Obviously, be enthusiastic, professional, confident, right? Thoughtful questions about the role and next steps. Now, this applies to talking to the recruiter. This applies to talking to the staffing person that you got the interview with. These are just general good guidelines. Again, the thing I really want to focus on is that when you're talking to the employer, you represent the recruiter. They gave you a seal of approval to at least advance one step in the process and talk to a hiring manager in tech, or the hiring manager decided to send you one place up the line and talk to the engineering manager. Regardless, you only got to have that conversation because somebody else put a little faith in you. Don't abuse that. Even if you are fumbling the interview and it's not going that well and you're like, man, this isn't a really good fit or whatever, be respectful, polite, kind. It makes a huge difference. Now, in terms of making a strong first impression, and this is for anyone in this whole ecosystem I've been talking about so far, it's with the recruiters, it's with the hiring managers, it's with the engineering manager once you get the job, right? Anyone you're working with, the things that you are genuinely interested in are unbelievably important. You shouldn't be sitting there in your mind going, okay, what's the thing that I need to say that'll magically make this person like me or want them to think I'm the right fit for the job? You're stuck inside your head. Stop doing that. Just be there and pay attention. And whatever interests you about the company, about the role, about the recruiter, right? About the technology stack, whatever interests you, ask about it, talk about it. Your genuine interest, and those of you who come to many of my talks will probably have heard this way too many times. Your genuine interest cuts through all kinds of social veneer or barriers. Real people love it when someone's genuinely interested in who they are and what they do. They love it because it's nice, it's kind, it's awesome. Who doesn't like it when someone's like, man, that thing you did was really cool. Tell me how that worked. Wow, absolutely, I will. Okay. So you need to start paying attention to what you're interested in. about the role, about the company, about the recruiter. That stuff is super important. All right. A little bit of notes on how to leverage the recruiter to get into tech roles, right? This is the one that I've probably said, I've talked about this from 4 different vectors so far. Don't let them down. Just be professional. When you're dealing with their client, remember, it's their client. It's their client. Like, if you let them down, they could lose hundreds of thousands of dollars of income for their company a year. You don't want to let them down. You don't want to be that guy or girl, because this is a small world in tech recruitment, and the word will get out very quickly that, no, you don't want to send Erik on an interview. No, we lost a whole contract because of that. No, okay? Make sure that when you're working with recruiters, you present not just the pure technical skills that you have. That's what the applicant tracking software can match up. If they're even looking at you, it means an algorithm in the applicant tracking software said, hey, there might be a good fit. Fine. What that means is anybody they have in front of them on their desk is probably a good technical fit. But what's going to help differentiate you and therefore make the recruiter look good is other soft skills: communication, problem solving, teamwork, collaboration, mentorship, the ability to teach others. These things are super important because they are transferable. In other words, it doesn't matter what kind of role they are trying to send you out for, whether it's a front-end role, back-end API development, database engineer, data scientist. Those skills transfer to any role. So make sure when you're working with recruiters that they're aware of the fact that you have passion and some demonstrated ability in these transferable skills. Don't just assume they know, hey, I've worked in tech for a while, I can probably collaborate as part of a team. Talk to them about that. Make sure it's really clear that that's a part of the being a technologist that you recognize is valuable. You've paid attention to it. You've worked hard over time to get better and better at it. And you feel like you've got some skills there. You can always improve, but you've got some skills. Tell them about these things. Make sure you try to talk to them about in-demand roles. Usually if you're working with a recruiter, you're in a hurry. You're not like, hey, I'm at my job. I've been here 3 years. Everything's stable. I think I might want to make a change sometime in the future. That happens. But usually you're like, hey, everything's fine. When you're working with a recruiter, usually you're on a strong, aggressive job hunt, right? So talk to them about in-demand roles. What are the things that people are looking for the most? Give yourself the best chance to get hired. And leverage their expertise in trying to figure out, hey, what kind of certs might be smart to get? What kind of upskilling should I pay attention to? In other words, you can have your idea from your fellow engineers about what technologies are cool, what certifications are crap, and which ones are really awesome and worth getting. And that's fine. But they are not recruiting experts. They are engineering experts. So when you have questions about certifications or upskilling, one of your sources for data should be recruiters. And that's why it's important to have a really strong relationship with them. So you can go to them and say, hey, listen, I've heard a lot of good and bad about certs and what people like and don't like. Can you tell me, which ones at the end of the day do hiring managers actually care about? And they'll tell you. You can, because they don't have a horse in this race. They're like, okay, yeah, well, here's what I've seen. All right. Another thing in terms of working with these recruiters and staffing agencies is you have to stay ahead of tech trends. You got to pay attention because they are. If they're professional, they are. You need to be just as on top of it. Okay. What tech stacks are in demand? For example, right now, JavaScript, unlike 10, 12 years ago, super in demand. Python, strong as always. AWS, look, I'm an Azure person because I was a Microsoft developer for a long time. AWS is a fantastic cloud platform, okay, and very much in demand. Obviously, generative AI, like ChatGPT, Claude, any of these large language model tools, they're very in demand, okay? Another current trend is the growth in remote work. It started wholesale with COVID, and it stayed very much the same as a lot of remote work jobs, okay? Companies are figuring out how to work with a remote distributed workforce. One thing to pay attention to is how recruiters provide market insights. In other words, look for recruiters and staffing firms that publish. They're paying attention to the market. Listen to what they say. If they have a blog, look for it, pay attention to it. If you're looking at tech news and the data is coming from someone in the staffing area, don't dismiss it. They know what's actually getting people hired and what isn't. Okay. As an example, if you talk to recruiters, they'll tell you right now, listen, ability to, have some basic generative AI skills, and more importantly, getting comfortable using the popular AI development tools like Cursor and a lot of the other things that are out there, it's starting to become essential. If you don't have it, employers are asking. So you got to stay ahead of these tech trends. If we looked at this exact same slide 3 years from now, the content would be different because it's an ever-changing industry. All right. Now let's talk about the fact that working with recruiter and staffing firms, this is investing in your career network. It's unbelievable the connections you can make and how you have no idea where some sort of opportunities can come out of left field because you've developed a strong relationship with a recruiter. Remember, these folks know folks. They know a lot of people in a lot of different industries, and their entire professional career is built around helping people. They help connect the right people to the right company. Well, that's what networking is all about. And so you're investing in your career network by developing a really good relationship with a staffing professional. They can give you personalized career advice because they know you. They can also be your advocate. I have, primarily back in the Portland area where I lived for a long time, there's a network of about maybe 10 to 15 recruiters that I worked with personally and very tightly for a long period of time, where in many cases I went out to their companies and delivered technology training to help, increase the base knowledge level of all recruiters in their agency. Like, they are my advocates. When I, ask for help online, or when I call any of them up or email them, they are all too happy to help because I've been very helpful to them over time and back and forth. So you're building a real great network, right? As an example, I have two favorite recruiters. Okay, worked with each of them for a long time. One of them actually shares my birthday, which is a fun coincidence. We have the exact same birthday, so we at least once a year we still say hi, right? Over this 7-year period when I was doing contract work, those two recruiters were responsible for 5 roles over that period. Most of those roles were like 6 to 12 months. So a big chunk of my income came because of my relationship with two people. So it is a valuable element of your career network, these recruiters, okay? Key takeaways. You got to choose the right recruiter. I hope I gave you a lot of background on how do you determine whether they're a good fit for you, right? It is genuinely about a relationship. It's not transactional. If a recruiter tries to treat you like a transaction, like a just cash exchange, walk away. I've never had it work out well, ever. And make sure you optimize your resume and your LinkedIn according to some of the data we went over here. And talk to recruiters about what are the current trends. What's out there that is getting people hired. All right, good. So we got 5 minutes here. We can do a little bit of Q&A. I know there were some questions that came in here. All right, so I'm going to go back up so I don't miss anything. So earlier, Serenity Smile said, were you able to get another contract through the same recruiter? Or is it okay to use more than one recruiter at once to be able to find another job quickly? Yes to both. In some of those instances, one contract ended and it was the same recruiter that got me that job. The contract ended abruptly, and they will turn around and help, get me somewhere else, right? So yeah, that has happened. But I always worked with multiple recruiters. I was never going to put all my eggs in one basket. Okay. So the thing there, is it okay to use more than one recruiter at once to be able to find another job quickly? Absolutely. And the fact is, when you go to the job board and you apply, a lot of the times that application is going to a recruiter at a company, and then you apply another one, it goes to a different recruiter, a different company for a different job. You're going to find yourself juggling 3, 4, or 5 different recruiters. It's just that, one, hopefully the information we went over today will give you some ability to really understand the quality level of the recruiter that you're talking to. And that can affect how aggressively you're going to go after that job. But 2, you'll find that even though you might be dealing with 3, 4, 5, 6 recruiters in your job search, it's those 1 or 2 that you've got a really strong relationship that more often than not are going to end up with a win. They're going to end up with you getting the job. Okay. What are some staffing staffing companies for tech jobs? Live in Oklahoma and can't see many. Honestly, I would just use Perplexity AI to do a search, or Google to do a search for it, right? They all advertise. They're all available online. You can start to look at all, their websites, their reviews, all that kind of stuff, okay? But a decent search online for remote jobs will end up getting you in contact with recruiters that service, say, all of America, because you'll contact them, you'll find out, that staffing firm at the other end of this is a big one, like, say, Tech Systems, which operates all over the country, right? And they happen to be filling for a job over in Pennsylvania, but you tell them, hey, I live down here in Oklahoma, they might have contacts, or they might have other remote jobs, okay? So you're just gonna have to do a bunch of Google foo on that to find the staffing companies for tech jobs. There are pockets of the country where there aren't a lot of tech jobs, right? Which means you're gonna either have to move or go remote. Where to find the third-party recruiters specialized to your industry? That's just a lot of Google, again, more Google searching. Okay, there's no one clearinghouse for it. It's just you're gonna have to become a thorough sleuth, become a detective online. What advice would you give someone who's just finishing school to enter the tech market with no tech experience? We could do an entire workshop on that, and in fact, have over and over again. That's what Jesse Ray. It's a perfectly fair question, Jesse Ray. What I would recommend you do, go to the Tech Academy's YouTube channel and look through all of our free YouTube videos that are on there. I think there's hundreds, if not thousands, on there right now, right? But you should be able to search in there for job search. Different tech talks that we've given on it. Some of them are very, very recent. Okay. But yeah, there's not enough time here, given the scope of that, to really provide an adequate answer. All right. So if it says it's a 12-month contract, what does it actually mean if they can just change the contract so it easily ends abruptly? It means exactly that it is, it's a 12-month contract, but remember that you're not being contracted directly by the employer. You work for the staffing company, and they are putting you on contract to the employer, and there is no guarantee that it's going to last as long as they say it's going to last. And you just have to walk in, like I said, with eyes wide open. But again, I think 3 times in 7 years it happened. Out of, I think, 14 different positions. Okay. So it doesn't happen that often. But it is a risk. It's just part of it. Okay. Now, if we're doing, another great question from Serenity Smile, if we're doing contract jobs, how soon to begin looking before your contract officially ends? I generally start about a month ahead of time. That's what I would do. Okay. And I would do it relatively slowly. I would reach out to my favorite recruiters at first and say, hey, listen, on this contract, it looks like it's going to end in about September or whatever. Can you start looking through looking at your desk and see what kind of job requisitions come across your desk? And then as it got closer, I would get super aggressive about it. And by the way, this is just advice for any of you involved in the job search. You need to be sending out a disgusting number of applications every day. However many you think is too much and not real, it should be more than that. And I'm not joking. People rarely take my advice in this very well, but each time during that 7-month period when I was aggressively doing contract work, each time I would have to search for a new job. Within the first day, I had 30 to 40 applications. Second day, I was at 80. By the third, I was about 120 to 130. And then I didn't need to do anymore because I had so many things that I was, juggling. Okay. But when I say that you need to be aggressive, I'm talking like literally it should be your full-time job. And the most important action of this full-time job is I need to send out another application. I need to send out another application. I need to send out another application. I cannot stress this enough. At the end of the day, there's no more important factor than you getting hired than absolute massive volume of applications. All right. Oh, this is good. Serenity, you're great questions. I've also heard that people form their own company, an LLC or a corporation, to work contracts, be able to claim deductions for taxes, company car, etc. Absolutely. I've done that many, many times. It's usually a relatively easy thing. You can have a sole proprietorship. You can form an LLC for really cheap. The one challenge is that some places you contract with are going to require you to maintain like $1 million or $2 million of general liability insurance. And that can be $2,000 or $3,000 a year. But for the right gig, it can be totally worth it. I did that once because I was going to get $92.50 an hour for a contract that was going to last at least 6 to 12 months. I'm like, okay, I'll be glad to do that. I don't care about spending $2,100 for a year's worth of general liability insurance because I'm going to make $92 an hour. Sure, done. So yes, people do that. Do we have to pay self-employment taxes when we take a contract? Yes, you do. So if you're taking a contract as a 1099 contractor, and that's why I said there's a bunch of nuance to that we didn't have time to fully flesh out. If you're taking a 1099 contract, IRS Form 1099 is how the company's going to, certify what it paid you and what it set aside with taxes. On a 1099 contract, they're going to set nothing aside for taxes. You're responsible for all of it. So you better charge a lot more than you want to keep per hour. But again, there's a whole lot of nuance to that. It's outside the scope. Outside the scope of this presentation. All right, we're a little bit over our time for an hour. I want to tell you how much I appreciate everybody for a couple of specific things. One, just for attending. Being part of this, I really appreciate it. But two, and more importantly, how engaged you were with your questions. They're great questions, really bright, really thoughtful. And I just love having you as part of our ecosystem. So let me go ahead and see if I can figure out how to stop sharing. Yep, don't know how to do that. Isn't this fun? There we go. Okay.
There you go. All right, great talk, Eric. Real important information for an important aspect of the tech career, and very, very informative. It's almost like Eric GPT.
Please don't make one of those. I think the Geneva Convention prohibits it.
Yeah, I want a little Eric chatbot. One quick point. We have had students that attended our school that have got contracting work, and they really excelled with their contracting work. And when they finished, they were offered a full-time job with the company they were contracted with.
Yep.
So you may have made that point, but that is just definitely happened many times with past students.
Yeah, exactly. Even if it's not explicitly called out as a contract to hire role, it happens quite often, right? They like, wow, you're working out great. Can we give you full-time work? And by the way, I didn't cover this, but if you got the job through a staffing firm, then what happens is the employer pays the staffing firm like a lump sum to say, hey, appreciate the fact that you introduced us to Eric. We want to bring him on full-time, hired directly through us. What do we need to pay you to steal him from you? And generally, it's like several $1,000s. And the company's like, it's worth it. We want to keep him on full-time. So that's arranged between the employer and the staffing firm.
Yeah, no, good point. Good point. All right, and I guess we will wrap it up there. Eric, that was great. Your talks
Pleasure.
are always inspirational and motivational. Adrian, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, I'm just gonna add a few things here, and yeah. So thank you again, Eric, for your tech talk and for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today. And yeah, so we host tech talks every Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. In addition to these talks, we also offer other events, including free classes, which are also hosted by Eric. And also, you can check our Tech Accelerator program. It is an advanced program that offers dynamic hands-on learning with 100 plus educational videos and live weekly sessions every Tuesday. And you can email us at, so paste it in the chat. Oh, there. So, yep. We're also excited
Yeah.
to let you know that we have. Yes, sorry.
I just want to say, I'm not for everybody. Fully understand that. Okay. I'm nerdy and opinionated and a lot of other things. But if you enjoyed any aspect of this and the way I like to talk about or teach technology, you owe it to yourself to check out the accelerator. It is so much fun. It's hands-on, like open voice, open mic, open camera, back and forth conversation, get our hands dirty, build things, break things, and we learn a lot. So I'd love to see you at the accelerator.
I highly recommend it.
Okay. And lastly, we're also excited to let you know that we have a lineup of Tech Talk scheduled all the way into February. So you can check out our Tech Talk lineup here. Just going to paste it in the chat there. So stay tuned on that for more updates. And again, thank you again for joining us today. And we hope to see you at our future events.
All right. Thanks, Adrian. And Eric, send some of that snow up our way, okay?
I'll try. Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks, Eric. Have a good weekend. Everyone else, have a great weekend. Thanks for coming out, and we will see you next week. Have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.